I didn't believe in mass hysteria until I lived through one. I was a second-year resident at Black Hollow Psychiatric Center, doing my inpatient rotation. The hospital was a government facility carved into the side of a mountain in West Virginia, originally used as a TB sanatorium in the early 1900s. Now it houses treatment-resistant psych patients, long-term commitments, and the worst of the state's forensic cases. It was my first week when I heard a nurse whisper, "Don't go past Ward A." At first, I thought she meant avoid some patients, but when I asked her where it was, she just blinked and said, "Ward A doesn't exist." I thought it was a joke, until more people said the same thing. By week 2, I was getting the same response from nurses, orderlies, even an attending physician. I'd say, "What's through that corridor behind the east fire doors?" And they'd say, "That section's been sealed off since the 80s. Structural rot, no patients, no staff." But here's the thing, I saw people going in and out. 3 times I watched an orderly push a patient bed through those double doors. Once I saw a nurse, green scrubs clipboard, walk in with meds. Another time I heard a scream from the hallway just before the doors shut. When I asked to check the blueprints of the building, the administrator told me I must be confused and sent me home early. So I did what any logical person would do. I went in myself. It was 2:45 a.m. during a storm. The entire floor was understaffed. I waited until the hallway was clear and used my badge to override the lock. The double doors hissed open slowly. Inside was a hallway. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. The floor was clean. Fresh footprints trailed away into the shadows. On the walls were whiteboards with room assignments, dates, vitals, all fresh. I followed the sound of something wheezing, slow, rhythmic, mechanical. A ventilator. There were patients in there. 7 rooms on each side, all filled. Some restrained, some pacing in silence, others staring blankly at blank walls. None of them looked up when I entered. There were no names on the doors, no nurses, no aides. I saw a woman in the last room to the left standing completely still. She was barefoot, gown soaked at the hem, skin grayish, eyes too wide. I knew immediately something was wrong. She turned to me like she was expecting me. Her mouth opened, and what came out wasn't a voice. It was static, like a broken radio signal. I stepped back, but the other patients were moving now. All of them, pacing to the same rhythm. A synchronized pattern. 4 steps forward, 4 steps back, murmuring something in unison. I ran. Back through the double doors. They hissed shut behind me. When I turned to look, there was nothing. Just a sealed wall. No doors. I thought I'd lost my mind. I even called in sick the next 3 days. When I came back, I asked around again. Everyone swore Ward A didn't exist. One nurse put her hand on my shoulder and said, "We've all seen it, but you stop talking about it if you want to stay." I wasn't the first, apparently. Over the next month, things got worse. Patients in unrelated wards started drawing the same symbol, a circle with jagged lines radiating outward like a sun or an eye or both. The same symbol was etched into the window of one of the seclusion rooms, scratched in with a fingernail deep into the safety glass. The patients kept saying the same phrase, "She's the empty ward." She. Always she. One night, our attending, Dr. Leary, called a staff huddle and calmly announced he was resigning. He said he couldn't pretend anymore. When asked what he meant, he said, "I discharged someone who doesn't exist. I've been prescribing meds to a dead woman." We never saw him again. The next week, 2 nurses quit. One had scratched open her arms with paper clips in the break room and said she needed to let the noise out. The other just walked off shift and never came back. Her locker was filled with drawings of that same circular symbol, dozens of them. The phrase kept returning, "She's in the empty ward." One patient, previously mute for 5 years, stood up in the middle of group therapy and screamed it at the top of her lungs until her vocal cords tore. When I finally asked the hospital administrator, calmly, professionally about the ward, she just stared at me and said, "There is no Ward A, Dr. Ames." Then she paused and added, "You should take a week off. You look tired." So I left, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started researching the hospital's past, archived blueprints, construction records. I even contacted a former janitor who worked there in the early 90s. He told me something that still makes my stomach knot. They closed Ward A in '89 after 3 patients committed suicide in 1 week. Then a nurse died, throat cut in the utility closet. No one found her for 2 days. After that, they sealed it off. I asked why they didn't demolish it. Because, he said, they couldn't. What did that mean? They tried. Sent in a contractor to gut the space. Guy came out screaming, said he saw things, said the patients were still in there. I asked if he remembered what the nurse's name was. He said, Mary Ann Laurie. That name was familiar, because I prescribed her lithium 2 weeks ago. Mary Ann Laurie. Ward A, patient number 13927. The chart was in our digital system. Daily vitals, medication history, notes from staff. One even written by me. But when I clicked to open her photo, the screen glitched, then shut off. I printed her chart. I showed it to the administrator. She smiled faintly, then tore it in half and said, "That chart doesn't exist. Ward A doesn't exist. You've been under a lot of stress, Dr. Ames." That was my last day at Black Hollow. I didn't finish my rotation, didn't finish residency. I still get emails from their system, appointment reminders, a patient portal login request. Once, an automated message said, "Dr. Ames, you are overdue for medication review on patient number 13927, Mary Ann Laurie." I blocked the sender, then I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a sticky note. It said, "She's in the empty ward. We all are now." I burned it. But sometimes at night when I walk past windows or mirrors, I catch a glimpse of a hallway behind me, fluorescent lights buzzing, no doors, no end. And I hear it, a voice like static whispering in a woman's tone. "Welcome back, doctor." Let me take you back to the fall of 1998. I was working the night shift at a psychiatric hospital deep in Pennsylvania's wooded countryside. I won't name the place, it's closed now and for good reason. But back then we called it the Hillside, a name that sounded like a wellness retreat on the brochures but was anything but peaceful. We treated all kinds of patients, manic episodes, schizophrenia, severe PTSD, even some forensic psych patients who weren't well enough for prison. I'd been there 3 years and I thought I'd seen it all. That changed when we admitted Thomas Green. Thomas was in his mid-30s, tall, thin, gaunt face. He spoke softly and only when asked. His file said schizophrenia, persistent delusional disorder, and a possible dissociative identity issue. He was transferred from another facility after an incident involving mirrors, though the report was vague. From day one, Thomas insisted that the mirror in his room be covered. We thought it was a simple delusion. Plenty of patients have mirror-based hallucinations or derealization episodes. Not uncommon. But Thomas wasn't aggressive. He wasn't paranoid. He wasn't even erratic. He was calm, polite, and terrified. "If I see him again," he told me his first night, "I won't be able to look away. He'll come through." I asked who he was. He only said, "The man in the mirror who isn't me." We covered the mirror. We documented it. We moved on. About a week in, during my 11 p.m., 7 a.m. shift, I was doing my rounds with Marta, one of our newer RNs. Around 2:45 a.m., we passed Thomas's room and saw his light on. He wasn't supposed to have access to the overhead, only the reading lamp by his bed. That was our first red flag. We peeked in the window. He was standing perfectly still, staring into the uncovered mirror. Now, let me be clear. We always covered it with a towel and medical tape. That night, the towel was folded neatly on the floor beneath the mirror. The tape was peeled off and placed on the nightstand like someone had deliberately unsealed it. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Thomas?" I said softly. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. He didn't blink. I stepped beside him and looked into the mirror. It was just us, him and me. But my reflection wasn't quite right. It was like looking into a mirror from a dream, just subtly off. The angles were wrong. My reflection blinked a second too late. "It sounds crazy, I know." "Do you see him?" Thomas asked in a whisper. "No," I said, trying to remain calm. "He's behind you now." The room was cold, much colder than it should have been. Our HVAC system was old, sure, but this was freezing. I felt my throat close up, fight or flight. Marta, who was standing near the door, turned pale. "I think he had a night terror," she whispered, motioning me out. I nodded. We gave him his PRN, as needed, Ativan, and stayed with him until he laid back down. I covered the mirror again, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw in that reflection. Over the next few weeks, strange things kept happening. We'd find Thomas's mirror uncovered again during night rounds. Towel folded, tape unstuck. But Thomas was on one-to-one observation by then. No way he was doing it himself. Then other patients started acting strange. One of the women in the adjacent room began screaming at her mirror, insisting someone was talking backwards to her through it. A young bipolar man in the next wing started gouging at his own face, saying his reflection didn't match his thoughts. It got to the point that administration had to step in. Mirrors were permanently removed from all patient rooms. That should have ended it, but it didn't. About a month after Thomas arrived, I was doing rounds alone. Marta had called in sick, and the night was quiet. Around 3:10 a.m., the intercom buzzed. Now, the intercom system only worked one way. We could hear into the rooms if we pressed the receiver on the panel, but they couldn't call out. When it buzzed, I assumed someone was pressing a call button, but no light came on, just that buzz. Then, breathing, heavy, deep, almost raspy, like someone with fluid in their lungs. I checked the panel. It was coming from room 19, Thomas's room. I walked down the hall, my footsteps muffled by old linoleum. As I approached, I heard a click. His door was unlocked. No way that could have happened unless someone opened it with the master key. I opened it slowly. Thomas was standing again, in the dark, staring at where the mirror used to be. His eyes were wide. He looked relieved. "He's gone," he said. But something was wrong. The temperature was freezing again. I looked down. There were prints. Handprints, from the size and shape, not his, on the wall where the mirror used to be, like someone had pressed from the inside. We requested an exorcism that week. I know how that sounds, but I'm not the only one who believed something supernatural was going on. One of the hospital's therapists, Dr. Lindstrom, had a background in religious studies. She said she believed in psychic resonance, that mirrors could act like thresholds or conductors in places with high mental trauma. She called what we were dealing with a residual manifestation. I called it evil. After that night, Thomas stabilized. No more requests to cover the mirror. He ate, socialized a little, but he never really improved. He kept a small pocket mirror under his pillow, which we took away twice. When we asked him why he kept it, he said, "I want to see if he comes back." We discharged Thomas 9 months later. No family came to pick him up. He left with a backpack and walked out into the rain. A few weeks after that, a nurse at another local facility called us. They'd just admitted a patient, young, nonverbal, covered in self-inflicted scratches. He'd been found wandering near a lake holding a hand mirror. When they asked him his name, he wrote Thomas on a napkin. We never confirmed if it was him. We removed all reflective surfaces from our ward. We switched to stainless steel panels instead of glass. No more mirrors. But they say the third floor was cursed. When I first started working at St. Aldhelm Behavioral Health Center in the winter of 2006, I thought that was just nurse superstition. The kind of nonsense that floats around places where tragedy and trauma live in the walls. The kind of stories overworked, underpaid night staff tell each other during 3 a.m. smoke breaks. But after what I witnessed in room 12B, I stopped doubting. St. Aldhelm's was the kind of hospital where the snow stuck to the windows longer than it should. The building was old, built in the 1920s, a former tuberculosis sanitarium before it was repurposed into a psych hospital. You could still see the skeletal remains of the original design, curved archways, iron grates, long, narrow halls. Everything echoed too much. The third floor had once been reserved for long-term residential cases, patients with chronic, untreatable mental illness, catatonia, advanced schizophrenia, personality disorders too severe for outpatient care. But over the years, that floor had seen the worst incidents, staff attacks, patient suicides, even a fire in the East Wing that killed 2 people in the 80s. They reopened it in late 2005 to relieve overcrowding. That's when I got transferred. I was 27, new to psych work, having come from the world of assisted living. I was hoping for a paycheck and a stable job, maybe something noble. I wasn't prepared for the residents of 3 North, and I definitely wasn't ready for Elaine Rowe. The admission. Elaine came in late January. She was admitted involuntarily after being found wandering down the middle of Wacker Drive in a sheer nightgown, barefoot in sub-zero temperatures. She was mute at first, shaking and unresponsive. But her eyes, God, those eyes, there was something in them, like she was seeing through you or past you. She was 34. No criminal record, no history of violence, a few childhood trauma flags in her chart, diagnosed quickly as suffering from acute psychosis and placed on a 72-hour hold, which extended. She didn't resist, she didn't speak, she didn't move much either. The only request she ever made, written on napkin in the cafeteria, was this: please do not place me in room 12B. Unfortunately, 12B was the only open bed we had. Even among seasoned staff, 12B had a reputation. It sat in the far corner of the south wing near the fire door. Something about the layout was wrong. The heating never quite worked there, even when maintenance insisted it was fine. The light flickered, even with new bulbs. More than one patient had been found talking to themselves in that room, muttering, scratching, rocking. A few had decompensated entirely and needed transfer within days. We chalked it up to coincidence. High acuity floor, sensitive population. That's what we told ourselves. But still, no one liked being assigned that room. Elaine was moved into 12B on a Thursday afternoon. I was on shift that night, covering rounds from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. She hadn't spoken a word since admission. At 3:42 a.m., she screamed. It wasn't just a startled yell. It was the kind of scream that tears your throat, like a wounded animal being torn in half. I dropped the med tray I was pushing and ran down the hall. When I got to her room, she was in the far corner, crouched beneath the window. Her nightgown was torn at the collar. Her face was twisted in panic. But what struck me most was her eyes, locked on the ventilation grate near the ceiling. I tried to approach, but she kicked at me, shaking her head violently. "She's inside the walls," she rasped. "She watches through the cracks." That was the first thing she said in 3 days. The observation period. After the incident, we started Elaine on risperidone. She became calmer, but no less disturbed. She refused to sleep. She covered every reflective surface in her room with torn bed sheets or paper towels. She tore pages from books and stuffed them under the door crack. I once asked her who she was, the woman in the walls. Elaine looked at me with something close to pity. "She died in this room," she whispered. "They locked her in here in 1952 and forgot. The staff back then, they left her. She tried clawing her way out. No one came, so she stayed. Inside. And now she wants me." I reported everything to Dr. Kellerman, the attending psychiatrist. He chalked it up to elaborate delusion, but I saw the worry in his eyes. Elaine's behavior was patterned, not chaotic, like she knew something she was trying to protect herself from. Around this time, other patients started complaining too. A schizophrenic man named Charles began refusing to walk past 12B, claiming he heard someone calling his name from behind the door, even when Elaine was sedated. A bipolar teen, April, said she saw a pale woman in a hospital gown crawling along the ceiling like a spider during group therapy. Then there was the night nurse, Tammy, who had a breakdown after being alone on the floor at 4 a.m. She was found sobbing in the janitor's closet, muttering, "Her hands are too long. She keeps reaching for me." Tammy quit the next day. The worst night came in early February. It had snowed 6 inches and the hospital was running short-staffed. I was alone covering the south wing. The hallway lights flickered worse than usual. I was doing rounds when I noticed Elaine's door was open. She never left it open. I peeked inside. Her room was pitch dark. The paper towels she'd shoved under the crack were scattered as though blown out by force. I stepped inside, flashlight in hand. "Elaine?" No answer. She wasn't in bed. I scanned the room and saw her standing in the corner, facing the wall, trembling. I started toward her. That's when the temperature dropped. Not like a draft. I mean instant breath visible, frost on the glass cold. And then, I swear this to you, I heard breathing. Not mine. Not Elaine's. It was coming from behind the wall, a slow, raspy inhale. Then a laugh, like dry leaves being rubbed together. Elaine turned to me. Her face was pale and wet with tears. "She's coming through," she said. "She needs a body." I backed out, called for a code gray. We sedated Elaine, moved her to another room. But even when she was unconscious, she kept whispering. She crawls on the ceiling when no one's looking. 1 week later, a new patient was admitted to 12B, a man named Daryl with schizoaffective disorder. Within 48 hours, he began complaining of seeing shadows in the vents. He claimed someone was whispering to him at night. On the third night, he was found unconscious in the hallway, dragging himself on his elbows, nails torn and bleeding. He had tried to crawl out of the room. He wouldn't say what happened, but he kept muttering, "She showed me her face. She has no eyes." After that, administration closed room 12B again. Permanently. What I found on my last day working at St. Aldhelm's months later, I broke protocol. I returned to 12B with Marta, another psych tech who believed me. We brought flashlights, a screwdriver, and a half bottle of liquid courage. We unscrewed the old vent cover above the bed. Inside was a cavity maybe 18 inches deep, and in that space we found something. Not a body, not bones, but there were fingernail scratches all along the inside of the vent wall. Dozens, hundreds. We also found something lodged between the slats. A bracelet. A copper one, stamped with a name, L. Harper, 1952. We checked the old records. Lillian Harper was a patient, paranoid schizophrenia, incontinent, deemed non-communicative and unstable. Admitted in early 1951, her file ended abruptly in May 1952. No discharge date, just a stamp. Deceased, no further action. No autopsy, no burial record. Epilogue. I don't work psych anymore. Sometimes I drive by the old hospital. It's still standing, though 3 North is sealed. Rumors say no one's been in 12B since 2006. The staff won't speak of it. The newer nurses laugh it off. But the old-timers? They don't laugh. I sometimes dream of that room. I hear scratching in the walls. I see long, pale fingers reaching through the vents. I hear that soft, dry laugh. And in the dream, Elaine is always there, her back to me, staring at the wall. Location, State Forensic Psychiatric Hospital, Southern United States. Time period, 2013. Narrated by Michael Mick Alvarez, RN, 14 years on unit. They always say forensic units are different. Different kind of patient. They're not just sick. They're sick and tried for something, or unfit to stand trial. Most of them have killed or nearly did. You look into their eyes and you don't see confusion like with some schizophrenics. You see calculation, or worse, nothing at all. I worked 14 years at North Hollow Forensic Hospital, a red brick relic tucked in the pine woods 2 hours from anywhere. It used to be a tuberculosis asylum, then a prison, and then it became our state's dumping ground for the criminally insane. I loved that job, right up until Jonas Heller. The intake. Jonas was 22 when we admitted him in June of 2013. No priors, no psych history. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, he snapped and butchered his mother and younger sister with a hunting knife. His neighbors heard the screaming. When the police arrived, he was sitting in the bathtub, fully clothed, rocking back and forth in 2 inches of water. There was no blood on him. He just kept whispering, "She made me do it. She made me do it." Initially diagnosed with acute psychosis, possibly dissociative identity disorder. But when he came to us, he wasn't ranting, he wasn't violent, he was just quiet. Creepy, unsettling quiet. I've seen catatonic schizophrenics, I've seen manic screamers. Jonas was something else. He stared right through you, and he never blinked. Ward 3E, the Predator Wing. We placed him on 3E, our high-security wing reserved for patients with known violence towards staff or other patients. Steel doors, full-body restraints, camera surveillance. We each carried panic alarms around our necks. But still, even with all that, Jonas made everyone nervous. He was tall, lean, moved like a shadow, never raised his voice, never resisted meds. But he watched everything. One of our orderlies, Marcus, swore Jonas memorized the med pass schedule in under 2 days. He always knew who would be on shift before we told anyone. He started requesting PRNs before his behaviors kicked in, like he was testing us. It wasn't long before strange things began to happen. The escalation. Jonas shared a day room with 5 other patients. The cameras caught him sitting in the same chair every time, unmoving for hours. He never read, never spoke, never interacted. Just stared into the corner of the room like he was watching something we couldn't see. Then came the incident with Daryl, a burly schizophrenic patient prone to aggression. Daryl attacked Jonas during morning meds over a tray dispute. Here's the thing, Jonas didn't flinch. He stood still while Daryl punched him twice in the jaw. The staff rushed in, tackled Daryl to the ground. Jonas just looked at me and said, "He won't wake up again." Daryl was found dead in his bed 2 nights later. Massive cardiac event. No drugs, no trauma. He died in his sleep with his eyes wide open and his hands clenched like he was reaching for someone. I saw the footage from the camera in the hall outside their rooms. At 3:18 a.m., Jonas stood outside Daryl's door, just stood there, not moving, for over 2 hours. Then at 5:30, he went back to bed. Daryl was dead by 5:45. We called it coincidence. We always do. The writing on the walls. A week later, another patient, Leland, a paranoid delusional, started smearing feces on his walls. Not unusual. What was unusual is what he wrote. "Red quiet comes at night." Over and over. Same phrase, same handwriting. And Leland was illiterate, could barely spell his own name. I found Jonas that night in his room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, smiling faintly. First time I ever saw him smile. "You smell it, don't you?" he asked. "It's starting." "What's starting?" He turned his head slowly. "The red quiet." "The attack. We should have transferred him, but protocol said he hadn't done anything. He was stable. No overt aggression, no med refusals, no outbursts. We were fools. It happened during 3rd shift. Lights dimmed, halls quiet. I was doing a bed check when my radio cracked to life, a code black on Unit 3E. When I got there, I saw it, blood everywhere. Jonas had ripped through his roommate, a man twice his size. He'd used a plastic utensil sharpened against the bed frame. The victim's face was barely recognizable. Jonas had gone for the eyes first. We restrained him. It took 5 of us. He didn't fight back. He just looked serene, calm as rain. While we held him down, he whispered, "Now it's here, the red quiet. You'll see her tonight." Jonas was moved to solitary observation, full restraints. For 3 nights, the cameras glitched at exactly 3:18 a.m. All the digital clocks in the West Wing reset, and every morning we found one of Jonas's fingernails on the floor outside his cell. Despite his hands being cuffed and gloved, he never spoke again. On his final night, the backup generator failed. The entire unit lost power at 3:17 a.m. When the lights came back on, Jonas was dead. No signs of trauma, no meds in his system, no heart attack, just gone. His eyes were closed, but he had one last expression on his face, a smile. What scares me now? We never got an autopsy. His body was taken by a government vehicle. No name, no agency badge. Just a man in a gray suit with a clipboard. The state called it cardiac arrest due to pre-existing condition. But we all knew better. They told me working overnights would mess with my head. I didn't believe it at first. I'd done nights before, in med-surg, even in trauma. The worst of humanity didn't bother me. I could manage blood, feces, dislocations, broken jaws. But nothing prepared me for the quiet violence of D ward at Claybridge Psychiatric Hospital. That floor changes people. There were no windows on the ward. The air always smelled of plastic gloves, bleach, and damp linens. The lighting was yellowed and flickering in places, like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Everything hummed. The lights, the vents, the security panel. It made it hard to tell what was real and what was just in your head. The patients were low stimulation, meaning they were too volatile for the general floor, mostly long-term cases. A couple had been there for decades, committed by court order and long since forgotten by family. A few were young, but completely dissociated from reality. D ward was where people were sent when no one else could handle them. We called it the belly of the whale. It was my 4th month on night started noticing the change in myself. At first, it was small stuff. I'd lose track of time during rounds. The same hallways felt longer than they should have. I'd turn my head because I swore someone whispered behind me, only to find the place empty. Every now and then, I'd feel something shift in the air, like the weight of the building changed, or like the whole place was breathing. Sleep became shallow. Dreams bled into waking hours. I'd think I saw someone move past the nurse's station on the monitor screen, only to rewind the feed and find nothing. It became routine to doubt what I was seeing. I blamed exhaustion, lack of sunlight, maybe even stress. That's what the hospital therapist would have said if we had one for staff. But I knew something was wrong the night I met patient 67. Technically, there is no patient 67 at Claybridge. The charts skip from 66 to 68, but everyone on night shift knows who I'm talking about. You feel it before you ever see her. The first time I noticed her, I was doing 2 a.m. rounds. I walked past cell 14, empty for months, sealed off after the man who lived there tried to chew through his own wrists, and saw someone sitting on the floor. Not standing, not pacing, just sitting. Pale, long dark hair, a gown several sizes too big, head down. I unlocked the door, thinking it was a new admit no one told me about. But when I stepped in, she was gone. I don't mean she ran, I mean the room was empty. Ice cold. I remember that most of all. The kind of cold that sinks in behind your eyes. I stood there for a full minute before turning off my flashlight. Then I heard something behind me. A voice. Dry, soft. She knows you now. I spun around. The hall was empty. I told myself it was a patient from down the corridor, but no one on D ward talks like that. Not calmly, not in full sentences, and not without meds. I didn't report it. You don't report hallucinations in this line of work. You get written up, you get transferred, or worse, you get referred for evaluation. The second time I saw her, it was in the reflection of the medication room window. I was alone, counting doses at the med station. The outer wall has a small window looking into the hallway. You can see yourself in it if the lights are just right. That night, the power had flickered during a storm. Everything had reset. I was running behind. I glanced up and saw her. Behind me. Closer this time, standing. Still barefoot. Gown wet at the hem like she'd walked through water. Her eyes looked like bruises, dark, swollen things too deep set in her skull. I turned, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the long, empty hallway behind the locked doors. I locked the med cart and left the room shaking. I started taking breaks in the stairwell after that. Needed the fresh air, the distance. I couldn't tell if I was breaking down or if I'd finally caught whatever it was that D ward infected people with after too long. Nurses come and go from that floor all the time. Some get transferred, some quit, some just stop showing up altogether. They never explain why. One night, close to the end of my shift, I found something taped to my locker. A note, written in shaky, deliberate handwriting. She comes when the quiet lasts too long. No name, no signature. I asked around, no one saw who left it. That night, we had a code in room 11. Patient seizure. I ran in with another nurse, Tamara. While she handled vitals, I restrained the patient's arms. He was convulsing, head slamming against the foam pillow. I leaned in close to keep him from biting his tongue. And right in the middle of the episode, his eyes snapped open, dead center on me, and he said, "She wants you now. She's behind your eyes." Then the seizure continued like nothing happened. I dropped his arms. I don't remember much of the rest of that night. I sat in the break room till morning, just stared at the vending machine and tried not to blink. When I went home, I stripped off my scrubs and put them in the trash. They smelled like mold and copper, like the old boiler room. The last time I saw her was my final shift on D ward. It was a quiet night, too quiet. No screaming, no banging. Even the patients known for nonstop pacing were still. The air felt thick, like something had settled in the walls. I did rounds, flashlight in hand, already counting the hours till sunrise. When I passed cell 14 again, my stomach turned. The door was ajar. That was impossible. Every cell was locked at night. And cell 14 didn't even have an occupant. I stepped inside. The lights inside flickered once, then twice, then held. She was there, standing in the corner, no expression, wet hair clinging to her face, fingernails worn down to the skin. The sound in the room dropped into something I can only describe as pressure, like a vacuum inside my chest. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't listen. She tilted her head slightly, like a curious animal. Then she opened her mouth, but no sound came out, only blood. Thin streams from the corners of her lips, down her chin, onto the floor. Then she stepped forward, just one step. That broke me. I ran, down the hall, through the double doors, slammed the fire exit, and didn't stop moving until I hit the street outside. I quit the next day, didn't give notice, didn't pick up my last check. I left everything behind. I still get calls from other nurses, people who knew me, people still working there. One of them, Jackson, said they reopened cell 14. New patient got assigned. They lasted 4 days before being found standing under the bed, biting their own tongue until it split in two. The report said catatonia with self-harm. Jackson said otherwise. He said they kept whispering, "She's behind my eyes. She's behind my eyes." I don't work psych anymore, but sometimes when I catch my reflection in dark windows, I see her, standing just over my shoulder. And sometimes if the room is still long enough, I feel her lean in close, and I swear I hear her say, "Now you're part of the quiet." Thank you for listening to this journey into the forgotten corridors of the mind, where reality blurs, silence hides screams, and not everything that watches you is alive. Each story tonight was inspired by real accounts, whispered confessions, and unexplained events behind locked doors. Whether it was the impossible ward, the violent ghosts of past patients, or the chilling feeling that you're not alone in your reflection. These tales remind us that madness doesn't always begin in the mind. It often starts with what the world refuses to believe. If these stories stayed with you, you're not alone. Until next time, stay awake, stay sane, and whatever you do, don't open the door at the end of the hall.